Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to the prep video for lesson 49 in this series on developing a survival game. In lesson 49, we will explore using the actor foliage type and the landscape painting tools that are built into Unreal. If you are using an engine version older than 4.23, you will not be able to do this tutorial. So make sure you're using 4.23 or newer. This project will work in 4.26, and we will be updating to 4.26 in the series down the road. There are some bugs if you try to do this on Unreal Engine 5, just be aware. This prep video is a bit different than the rest of the prep videos so far. This is the first prep video where I have taken content directly from the tutorial to make the prep video. The content for this video was recorded as part of the tutorial, but was removed to make this video. If you want to follow along and look at the settings I'm showing, go to your project, go to Edit, select your editor preferences, then search for Procedural Foliage Generator and hit the checkbox. Once you have done that, make an actor foliage type by right-clicking, going to Foliage, and selecting your actor foliage type. This video and this series have been brought to you by Patreon sponsors like Haas. You can support this channel too by hitting that like button below, and if you've not done so already, as only 50% of my viewers have, make sure to subscribe as well. And if you want to take your support a bit further, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. Now, let's look at our actor foliage. So far, we have technically, while we have not talked about it, explored two methods of placing our foliage in the world. The first method we looked at, without really talking about it, was placing it by hand, where we can rotate and set things how we want them to be set. And there we go, we can place it that way. The other way we've worked on it is with our procedural generators right here, where if we hit play, so I'm going to play from this spot, we'll have the large herbs way too clustered down there and some trees up here. So there are trees spawning in, and over here are our herbs. Now, we updated to this version of the engine for a couple of reasons, and that's the foliage placer. So in earlier editions of the foliage placer, you just had the static mesh foliage. In newer versions, 4.23 and beyond, you have actor foliage. So we have a few different ways of spawning in resources. Well, we also have something else that we've done that is kind of interesting, which is our random generator foliage. So our random generator foliage is, go to our items, go to our resources, any one of our food or construction ones. We have the, well, I'm on the tree, so we're gonna do the tree random, where we move it, we get different trees. We can actually, take this random, so I need to go back into the place mode. We can take this random and place it in any one of the things we looked at so far. Hand placing, our volume, or this foliage generator. We can also, in our foliage generator, do our actor foliage. Now, the other thing we can do is we can do a procedural spawning of volume. So, and now we have a bunch of options we can go through with our tree. So, we have how much we want the Z offset. So how much placed down do we want it? How much raised up in the air do we want it? Well, we're not going to change that one. Do we want it to align to normal? So align to normal, as you can see, is whether the foliage should have their angle adjusted from the vertical to match the normal of the surface it planted on. Yep, or painted on, sorry. We do want that. How much we want to align, how much the max angle should be for adjusting. If we want it to randomly yaw, so if we wanted to yaw on the vertical axis, how much we want it to change its pitch angle by. This is one of the more interesting ones, the ground slope angle. What's the angle at which a tree can be planted here? Do we want trees to grow from, let me just go back to our tree real quick. That was the wrong folder. Do we want a tree to be able to grow at a steep angle like that? Or do we only want it to grow on more shallow angles where there are where it's less likely to look weird? We want to go on flat surfaces, you know, if there's a sheer vertical wall, like, you know, the edge of our mountain here, we don't want a tree growing up the side of the mountain like that. It would rotate, by the way, on normal to do that. We don't want something like that, do we? So we have options around the angle at which our tree grows, or whatever we have. We also have rules about how high up on the z-axis I will grow on our landscape. You know, if it's too low down, it won't grow. If it's too high up, it won't grow. Gives us a feeling of almost being able to control for mountains. Then we have, similar to our other procedural generator, where can it grow? And like our, actually, sorry, we looked at another version of foliage generation, and that's in our materials, in our ground, in our grass. We have this LGT grass type, this landscape grass type, which is honestly a bit limited in what we can do. We don't have all this control. But like this, where we had to say what the materials we want to use are, the names had to be exactly matching what's in our layer blend. This works the same way. So we type in the name of the material there, and we say how much of that material has to be present for this to grow. So by present, there's grass right there for some reason. I don't mean the foliage, I mean there's a grass material that we can't see there. Or right here, as we trace out, and we have that little fade of grass leaves that you can see. Let me see if I can get a better angle to take a look at that. There's grass there. There's clearly grass right there in terms of material. So what this is saying is how much does that material has to be present for us to grow. Let me just get rid of this. We have our collision settings, which are our radius around it. And there's things we should really do in terms of figuring out what our radiuses should be. Is we can take our tree and place it somewhere in the world. I probably want to place it a bit higher, to be fair. And what we're going to do is just raise it up here for a moment. And I'm going to switch from my view from perspective to, say, left. It doesn't really matter which we do it in. I'm going to go to lit just so I can see a bit better. And let me find my tree. There it is. What we can do for our collision settings is we can hold the middle mouse button down and we can draw out how big it is at the widest spot. So about 120 units there. And we can also see how big our shadow canopy is going to be. So let me just find a wide spot here. I'm going to go to that leaf from the center. And it's about 305 units out. So if we were to multiply that for both directions, that's 610 units. Let me just delete that for a moment and go back to perspective view. We can then in here set our shade radius and our collision radius. So we do have options around that as well, which our shade radius will be useful if we want to say have things only grow in shade or only get spawned in shade. Next we have clustering. And clustering is a bit hard to think about in terms of just clusters. What you need to think about when we look at a procedural foliage generator tool, because that's what this is, it's one of the procedural foliage generation settings, is that the engine runs a simulation. It runs a simulation to determine how many years this tree has been around. And it spawns in a number of seeds, virtual seeds that get planted in the world, and some of those will grow into trees. So we have all of that sort of embedded in here. So we have number of steps. So this is the age. This is the number of years the tree's been growing. This is the number of seeds it's planting. This is the average spread distance from the mother tree and each subsequent mother tree there'll be. So if I did 3 years and it spawns one tree in a 10-meter area, then they're in that 10-meter area. There are now 2 trees in year 2. Actually, it's year 0. Year 1, there's 2 trees. They'll be within a 50-meter or 50 Unreal Unit distance, centimeters really. The next year, both those trees will release seeds on the same principle, and so forth and so forth. We can also have the amount of variance we have from spread, so it's anywhere from, right up against the tree, 0 to, 200 units. We can do seeds per step, so it's really 3 seeds that are being spent per step. The distribution of seeds, and any offsets we want for that. Then we have the growth settings. And the growth settings kind of are, well, where can it grow? Can it grow in shade? Well, yeah, if it can grow in shade, can it only spawn in shade? So this is, can it grow in shade? And then if it can grow in shade, is it only able to grow in shade? What is the initial age we're going to allow the tree to be? So we start at year 0. We can go up to 10 years. If there's overlap, who has priority? So the lower number is what gets spawned in. So if I have 2 tree types and one is set to 1 and one is set to 0 and they want to go in the same area, the tree set to 0 wins. And then how big can the tree grow? Minimum of 1 to a max of 3. But also the growth rate curve. It could be like a human where it, starts really slow and then has a growth spike towards the end. Outside of that, we have our usual instance settings that we've seen before. Is this a static? Is it movable? In terms of lighting, when do we start culling it from our view? Does it cast shadows? Does it affect indirect lighting? Does it affect distance field lighting? And does it have dynamic shadows? All this sort of stuff we've seen previously. So, I know I've done a whirlwind tour of these settings, but it's a good way to start thinking about it and playing with the numbers and seeing what happens. All right, that takes us through what we needed to discuss for today's prep. We'll go into the tutorial and actually make some active foliage types and populate our island with our herbs and our trees. This video has been brought to you by Patreon sponsors like Haas, 1Vault10, Rian, Galois, Connor, and Hanas. I look forward to seeing you in the tutorial proper, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.